All right, we now welcome on Matt Lisle. Matt is the founder of the Hitting Vault, an awesome online resource, for coaches, players, parents. I've seen some of his content, been following him for several years now, and he's just a great guy, and B, just puts out just quality content consistently, and that's the hardest part, doing it consistently. So, Matt, I appreciate you coming on today, man.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate being on.
So you've been all over the place, man. I mean, you've coached everywhere. You've done baseball. You've done softball. There's going to be a lot of people who are listening to this who maybe already know who you are, but there's going to be some who maybe don't. And for those who don't, could you just give everyone a little bit of a background on yourself in baseball and softball?
Yeah. So for me, I coached high school baseball with my first foray. Got done playing a little bit of college ball and got my old high school asked me to coach. So I coached high school baseball for 4 years and then I coached NAIA for a little bit and went back to high school. I was a head coach at a D3 baseball school in 2008. And then I went back to coach high school for a couple more years and then got an opportunity to be the hitting coach at the University of Oregon for softball. I had never coached softball before in my life, but I had started watching it that year, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is a fun sport, and it looks the same. It was the same as baseball, other than the tempo was a little faster. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And for me, as a ADD guy who liked the fast pace of it, I was like, this is really fun. So I got into coaching softball, and I did that for a few years, and then I started sharing on social media a ton, and back in 2012, 13. And, now social media is a whole different landscape. But back then, there weren't a lot of, hitting guys on social media. And so, like you talked about being consistent, I just started sharing stuff all the time, every day, many, many hours. And next thing you know, I had 100,000 followers and 200,000 followers, and it just really snowballed. And so around 2015, I started getting DMs from people, Jock Peterson, Daniel Scalzo, a lot of these MLB guys, and some GMs and different organizations saying, hey, we've been following you on Twitter or Facebook for a little while. Would you be willing to work with one of our guys or work with us? And it kind of just snowballed from there. And so I coached at the University of South Carolina in Missouri. I got an opportunity to coach the Chicago White Sox last year. And so my journey, I've coached at every level: NAIA, D3, D2, D1, Pac-12, SEC, Major League Baseball. And, it's been a journey. I think, a lot of people, the latter of it has been crazy. I've been very blessed. So that's kind of the gist of my career in it. It's been, and I think the same for you, Patrick. Like, you've done a great job sharing on social media, and I think what's been the most awesome thing about social media is that 2013, 14, 15, when I would talk with front offices and major league teams, outside Twitter guys who had never played pro ball, it wasn't going to happen. Like, there weren't a lot of hirings, and so now, because of social media, because of Twitter, and people putting out really good content, you see guys like Jason Ochart, yourself, me. There's all these guys have gotten hired because they've just shared really good content, and finally, that kind of barrier went down of outside guys who didn't play. And I think there's still a long way to go there, as a lot of people are learning. It's still a difficult landscape, but it has changed a lot, and it's been really fun to see just the opportunities that are happening for people in baseball.
So since you've done softball and baseball, I know there's still an argument sometimes about, what the different softball swing or whatnot. I think, we can say it's the same swing. Now, but what would you say are the differences when you coach softball versus baseball? Is it just practice design? Is it how you work with the players? Like, is there anything different at all between coaching softball and baseball players?
To me, the biggest differences are when you coach women in general, like delivery of feedback sometimes has to be a little bit better. And it's made me a better communicator. I think in the men's game, a lot of times we can be really direct or use sarcasm to get things across sometimes, and it doesn't land. I learned very quickly it doesn't land very well when you're coaching females. So I learned how to be a better communicator, which I think was good in general, like men and women. It helped me a lot, just learning how to deliver feedback in a better way. But swing wise, the only difference is that when you get to the high levels, the difference between softball and baseball is that as baseball players evolve, like when we're 12 years old, we play on the 200-foot fences, and then we get to high school, it's a little bit closer to the big league. But in college and pros, like you have these long fences. Well, in softball, the fences are 200 around at 10 years old, 12 years old, 18 years old, 22 years old. The fences don't change. So we get these college players in, and thanks to Alan Nathan and some of the work he's done, I've gotten to know him pretty good. Like, it takes a ball at about 24 to 26 degree launch angle at 68 miles an hour to get out of almost any Division I softball ballpark. And I can tell you right now, every Division I softball player can hit a ball 68 miles an hour. And so it's different. It's a little bit different. Whereas in baseball, you can have guys at Division I level who aren't going to hit home runs or hit a lot of home runs for that matter. Whereas softball with 200-foot fences, it's a different ball game. You actually have the ability to put the ball in the air way more. And so for me, softball has been such a low-hanging fruit in the sense of development because there haven't been a ton of softball instruction. There have been dads, coaching travel ball and stuff like that. And so you can come to a new program and you can see like a lot of these girls got by on their talent. And then when you start putting swing development into place, they go from, I've had players go from like 1 home run their junior year to 13 home runs their senior year, just by learning how to put the ball in the air and learning how to use their bodies better and having, a bat path that is different. And so that's probably the biggest differences. Again, the field, like you can get away with a lot in softball if you are strong and can get the ball in the air. And so from a movement standpoint, I always use the example, like if you had a female who's like 5'10", 200 pounds, like big, strong player, they could hit home runs all day long without striding, without even picking up their feet. They could just literally fungo a ball out of the ballpark. Or baseball players, like from a load gather stride process, like they have to be able to create more force for the most part. In softball, you can take away a lot of movement if you can get the barrel on the ball with some bat speed. You can hit it out of the ballpark. So there are some differences a little bit in that sense. Like, but swing wise and practice development wise, we do the exact same thing.
So you in a sense, you don't have to worry about them being as mechanically efficient.
Yeah, it depends. Again, like I think for the high end, really athletic hitters, yeah, you're right. We don't have to spend a ton of time on swing mechanics, but I would say that the average Division I softball program, outside of their top 3 or 4 or 5 hitters, they still do have a long way to go. So we do spend a lot of time on that, but you're going to have a handful of players that it's like, they could have a terrible swing, but if they get on time and the barrel's there, and you can hit a ball 200 feet. Now, I think if softball ever gets to, and I can see it happening with offense that has boomed in the last 5-10 years. If softball was ever to move their fences back to like 250 instead of 200 feet and had more of an outfield and it changed the home run game a little bit, I think it would change the game a lot with just moving the fences back a little bit. And so a lot of teams and a lot of programs have learned, hey, if we can get the ball in the air here, and we don't have to hit the ball 85 miles an hour to get it out of the ballpark. We just got to hit it a little bit harder. So, it's kind of interesting in that stand. That's one of the biggest differences I see.
When you're working with softball players, I know this past year you were at Fresno State, for example. When you're going to these players, going up to them and working with them, and you're preaching getting the ball in the air, is it taboo to them? Is it similar to baseball in a sense?
Yeah, I think for a lot of them, baseball is the same way. It's, I had one of our best players this year say, I was always taught not to drop my back shoulder. You keep telling me to do this, and it really is hard for me because my dad and my coaches always said, don't drop your back shoulder. And so there's a lot of that. I had a couple players for sure say, I've always been told to do this, and now you're telling me to put the ball in the air. And I'm not a home run hitter. And I'm like, okay, we have the 80-mile-an-hour club in softball, and we talk, and that's kind of the goal for our exit velocity with our hit tracks. And we've got 9-10 players in it now. And I've tried to tell them, hey, it takes 68 miles an hour to hit the ballpark. And every person on this roster, we have 20 hitters, every one of them can hit 68. So nobody here can say, I don't hit for power. I don't have the ability to hit for power. Yeah, we had to break that down a lot. We led the country in triples this year. Our park is a little bit bigger than other people, so we have this kind of triples alley, a little bit like AT&T, and so we were on pace to break like NCAA record for triples. We were on pace to break the school record for triples. I think at one point we had 20-something triples, and Florida State was number 2 with like 10. I mean, it was just an insane amount where they started learning, hey, we can hit the ball with a lot of power. And I think there's a lot of taboo around that, and softball players, put the ball on the ground, and it's taken a little while, but it's changed a lot because of the internet, social media, a lot of guys, baseball guys going into softball, and it's definitely getting out there a lot more.
Yeah, no, I was following you guys last year, and I did see, you guys were tearing it up for Fresno State, and then I saw even when you were with South Carolina too, just a couple years ago. Again, just incredible offensive success. I mean, success leaves clues everywhere you go, Matt. You guys just dominate. I mean, it clearly shows what you're teaching and implementing is working.
Yeah, I've been really, really fortunate where for me, a lot of times I've come into programs that maybe they had down years the year before, and at South Carolina, had a bunch of down years, and we ended up top 7 in the country, and we broke the home run record and all these things. And so I think those things just shine a bigger spotlight on it. Whereas I think there's a lot of hitting coaches that come into programs that already are established or have good programs. So it's not seen as much. And I just have been really lucky that I've gone to places where the next year we've had these huge jumps, and just been really fortunate with that. But I'll tell you, hitting is very difficult, and everybody and a lot of your things. But I'll tell you, in my game of this, hitting development, it really doesn't have to be that difficult. It doesn't. The puzzle is really not that difficult, and I think, as if you can spend time with your hitters, really get to know like what their goals are and what they're capable of and what their needs are, that the actual development piece, to me, it's really not that difficult. And so for me, I think that a lot at the college level, I think it's really difficult for coaches to really spend the time to develop hitters. They want to get players that are pretty polished, and they want to be able to manage them and their stuff. But if you can make a focus on actual development and create the time for that, which can be difficult at the college level, you can see. Carlton Salter is a great example. Carlton does a great job. And, when you get down in the lab and you really get to work with these hitters, you can make huge differences. And for me, at the University of Oregon, that's kind of when I first got there, I'm like, hey, we're going to really get into the cages, and we're going to really start developing individual plans. And for me, it took a lot more work, but at University of South Carolina, every college team that I knew, you had scouting reports on a pitcher. And so let's say you're facing this pitcher, here's the scouting report. Well, I decided to just, let's give it a try for this season. I'm going to build individual scouting reports for every single hitter. So every single hitter had their own plan. Like, hey, if this person's pitching, here's where they're going to stand in the box. Here's the pitchers you're going to go. And we created individual plans. And so from a scouting report standpoint, I mean, I put in way more work than I ever should have in my life, but we saw the results of, in the very first weekend in the SEC, we played Tennessee, who was number 2 in the country at the time. I think they were like 30-0, and we swept them, and we scored like 35 runs and run ruled them in one of the things. And the players like, wow, those individual scouting reports that were just for me, they made a huge difference. And so, I just think that in our game, with hitting specifically, like I said, the more granular you can get to helping those individual players develop, you're going to see that. But as if you're just kind of running hitting stations and just kind of have a general hitting philosophy, we're gonna live oppo, or we're gonna do this. I just don't. I think you're going to get whatever you have talent wise, and you're not going to really get the potential out of them.
So because of the time restrictions, do you prefer the professional baseball game just because you can work with guys as much as you want, versus in the NCAA, there's a time limit, so you can only per NCAA rules work only work so many hours.
Yeah, it's. I would say, I could live in the cages for a really long time. I think what you have to do at the college level is just prioritize. So a lot of our hitting, we're small group hitting, and so instead of being in the cages for an hour and a half or an hour like most programs do, I would create like these smaller groups, and we hit in groups of 2 or 3 so that I could spend a lot of time with them. That's kind of how I combated that a lot. But yeah, I would say people ask me a lot of times, what's the biggest difference with college softball players and college baseball players? And honestly, the biggest difference, and I hope it changes someday more, is that most college softball players, that's the height of their game. Like they're going to get their degree, they're going to get jobs, and softball that's the end of the road right there. And so, and there is some pro softball opportunities, and they're not very much. They don't pay very well right now, but they're trying to build it, and that's great. But until then, all the college baseball players, when you're at a college baseball program, you work college players, their goal is to get drafted, and a lot of them are trying to make it to the pros or try to get drafted. And so the amount of work that they're willing to put in, the extra time, like that is just different because they see this, goal of trying to make professional baseball. Whereas in softball, a lot of hitters, this is the kind of height of what they're going to do. And they're going to put in the extra work because they want to be great players. They want to win. But there's this extra level that you see out of college baseball players who are like, hey, I'm really going to start grinding even more, put in the extra time because, hey, they want to get drafted, and they'll put the work in for that.
Do you find yourself as a coach sometimes wanting to work or spend more time outside of the cage working on a plan, particularly for a player who is hungrier than the next guy? I feel like that's a normal human thing that I feel like as coaches we sometimes feel. Do you feel that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that was really cool when I was at the University of Missouri, my office where I sat at my desk, you could see the batting cages. So it was really cool that I could be at my desk working, and players are hitting in the cages, and they would just come across the hall and like, hey, coach, and they sit down and they would talk about, it could be planned. We could talk about their hit tracks data. We could talk about different things or their plate coverage and contact points. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's why you love coaching and why you do it and why everybody does, because like, the aspect of the relational side of coaching where you get to really sit down and like help someone develop a plan. For me, there were so many countless nights, 2015, 16, 17, that I had major league players who the game would be over at 10:30 p.m. I'd be in bed and start texting me video of them, watching their swings. Like, what do you got here? And talking to me and I would stay up till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes, like talking, and again, like that's just in our blood, our DNA. Like we're willing to sit down and talk it out, and we love doing that. And I think, as much time as I love talking in the cages too, it is really fun to sit down and say, hey, what do you think about this, and try and problem solving together when it comes to plan stuff. And I think what's really awesome about 2020 is the amount of data that we have in TrackMan that we can really talk about, like, hey, you have barrels in these zones, your contact point here, your chase rate over here, and we can start really honing in on attacking things. And at Fresno State, for example, we have the hit tracks in the cage and the EHAC, which throws all kinds of different pitches. So we can have days where it's like, hey, I'm going to set the machine up that's going to have rise balls out of the zone and curve balls low in the zone. You got to take the rise ball, you got to swing at this pitch. Or I can say, hey, Patrick, you're barreling up all these zones, middle out, we're still struggling getting barrel on that, getting some good exit velocity and driving it. Let's work on that today. And I'm gonna set the machine up to literally attack you right in that little square. And so we can do great work without ever talking about your swing or without, having to make it about swing mechanics. And I think there's a lot of hitters that really can get a lot better by doing that. And so what I've seen on the internet world the last few years from Twitter and social media is that you have these guys like, we got all this data and just, hit the ball in the air and just do that. And they're basically no swing mechanics. Then you have the guys on the other side of the spectrum. It's like, 100% swing mechanics. We don't need data or anything to tell us that. And I think that the hitting coaches that do it best are the ones who live in the middle. It's like, hey, I'm going to use data to help my hitters get better, and we're going to use swing mechanics and help hitters get better. But we're not going to be all mechanics. We're not going to be only data and only this, and we're going to find the way that works best for that hitter. And I think, in my experience, the hitters, hitting coaches that do that really well are the best ones I've seen out there.
Do you have a system that you personally like to use when, let's just say, for example, this past year at Fresno State, like every month you do retesting on KVS and blast motion and hit tracks, or like what's your system?
So my first system is that I interview the player and I get to know them. Like, what are your goals? What do you want? And, for me, I kind of always start with a loaded question. Like, do you think you could hit for more power? Like, so I never try to talk about stats. Like, hey, do you think you can hit 20 home runs? And it's like, oh no. But I was like, do you think you could hit more doubles? Do you think you could hit for more power? So, I frame it around like, what is it that you want to get accomplished for this year? Start with that. And some of them have a pretty good sense of their swing. Some of them have no idea. And then, we do a physical assessment. I'm on base use certified, and it's a perfect assessment. So I do that with our strength and conditioning coach together. And then we talk about weight room, and the weight room plans are really, we've got the team workout plan, but we also have individual plans on assessment. So we know, what their mobility and strength is like, and we focus on that. And then K-Vest, hit tracks. So, we do a full assessment. So I try to get a couple hundred swings with that stuff. K-Vest, maybe not that many swings just because the output's difficult, maybe 20, 30 swings with the K-Vest off of the machine or live pitching. And then we sit down with the data and say, hey, here's the deficiencies. Here's where you have a lot of strength. And then I build out a hitting plan. It's like a PDF that I give them that's like, here's 5 drills we're going to work on this month. Here's all your exit velocity and all your data. Here's like the goals, or here's like the averages for, what we're trying to get to. And then just retesting them about once a month. It kind of depends on the hitter, how far along they are, but about once a month, revisit that plan and say, okay, hey, we've seen this numbers go up. This has gone down. Your attack angle is much better now, and these things. So it's kind of this holistic approach of, hey, you swing at these pitches out of the zone. And so using a StatCast hit tracks version of it in the sense of contact points, and just saying, okay, here's what you do really well. Here's where we need work, and let's work on both of those things and get better at it. So our plans are always very, very individualized. And then I try to do my best in the college setting to like pair up players, say, hey, you two hitters have very similar patterns and needs. And I'll be honest, I think I stole it from Max Dutto with Driveline, is putting players in buckets. Hey, you are in the exit speed power bucket. That's like your biggest need. And then we've got like the swing mechanics bucket. Like, hey, you know what? You've got some power, some exit velocity, some bat speed, but like contact is not great. Attack angle, these things, your batted ball data is not great. So let's work on that. And then we've got the hitters who are like, are doing really well in those areas, but they make bad swing decisions, or certain pitches they struggle with, and it's mostly like a lot of mindset and approach. So I try to put hitters in those buckets as much as I can to say, hey, let's focus on that bucket for a little while, because you and I know, like, especially if you have younger hitters, like they could have 20 things wrong with their swing. Yeah. And something that I had learned from Craig many years ago was, when you assess a hitter, what is the one thing right now? What is the most important thing that we can do to help this hitter? And so as a hitting coach, a lot of times we want to go, well, you've got this wrong. You do this, you sway, you do this, and it's like, and the hitters are like, oh my God, I'm the worst. Whereas if we sit down and go, okay, hey, they've got a lot of things going on. I'm not going to tell them that, but you know what? I really think if you don't sway in your load and get over this, over your backside, and your head goes back, I think you're going to, that could be something whatever the one thing is that would really help them, let's focus on that one thing and see and go from there. And that's always been an approach that I have tried to keep, because if you tell a hitter they have 3, 4, 5 things wrong, and you're trying to tackle all of them, I have not seen a lot of success with that.
Yeah, hitting is pretty complex as is. So I definitely agree, and I've definitely have made that mistake before of listing off of those things for. Yeah, that wasn't a good conversation with the player. But I saw on Twitter a few months ago, I think, someone started this thread of, if you could pick 2 to 3 things or 2 to 3 tools that you could only use to develop hitters, what would they be? I think some people had like K-Vest, blast motion, hit tracks maybe. What would be your few things that
Yeah,
you
I
love?
saw that. That was actually really good. A meme had like 9 different things on there.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I'll tell you, in 2015, I bought my own hit tracks. My wife to this day, she would kill me if But I bought my own hit tracks, and that off season I was working with 30 to 50 pro players, and when I bought that hit tracks right around the off season, I will tell you that changed everything in the way that I work with pro players in the off season, because up until that point we were working on swing mechanics and we were having success and it was going well. But like you in front toss, you hit a ball and it goes to the back of the cage and you're like, oh, that was a really good one, thumbs up.
Yeah.
When you put the hit tracks in there and you start seeing the data of the ball and all this stuff, and you have pro players hanging around, the competitive nature of training changes, and the data. And so and it's a BS meter. You know what I mean? You could say like, hey, I want you to do X, Y, Z. And all of a sudden, like, their exit velocity goes way down or up. Like it's a kind of a truth seeker in the sense. So for me, hit tracks was a game changer in the sense of how it works. So to me, that would be number one. I think blast motion sensors would be number two in the sense of just like, vertical bat angle, bat speed, time to impact from that rotational acceleration stuff, I think would be really important. So for me, those would be the biggest things that I think I'd have. And then maybe from there, maybe a pitching machine. Like if I had to have a tool, like to make it game-like practice, if I had to have something, I mean, I can always do front toss. That's not a tool. So probably a pitching machine would be the thing that I would use. And just because I can't simulate stuff very well.
Don't you think it's hard to, I mean, I think of like for K-Vest, which I've had for a couple years now, it's difficult because, you look on like their kinematic sequence chart and one swing is really good. And then the other swing is like, it's not so good. And then the next one's good. And so it's, how do we best use this? You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
swings are like snowflakes. There's no two that are
Yep.
truly alike. I mean, I think that players move consistently a certain way, but I mean, is there a way that you like to use your K-Vest specifically?
Well, for me, I've learned a lot. We talked about before, Ryan Johansson with the White Sox, a good friend of mine. And one of the things that he has really instilled in me a lot is the word context and having context. And, in my conversations with Justin Stone too, the one mistake that I first made when I started doing data and doing K-Vest especially was not having the context of the pitch location or the pitch. And so I think it's really important to be able to know, like, hey, this was a low and outside pitch, or this was a high and in pitch, and knowing what the context of the pitches that you're evaluating. So one of the things that we did that I had some fun with the White Sox in spring training last year was we did the K-Vest off the machine with everybody. And then I had them do it off front toss and tee, and the numbers are way different because hitters off the tee, they really crank, they load up, there's a lot of more internal rotation of their shoulders, and so the K-Vest data was all over the place. And so trying to figure out the context of each pitches. And so for me, when it came to that, K-Vest is a perfect example of trying to figure out, okay, what do they do on this pitches and what do they do on pitches that they hit really well? If they hit a ball 105 miles an hour, let's look at their ground force data. Let's look at their K-Vest data and like, okay, we know this is a good swing. And so like, that could be the model of what we're trying to reach for this hitter. And so trying to keep track of those ones or keep track of the bad ones and say, okay, we noticed that on these certain pitches, let's do curveballs or changeups. What do they do? And so, context is really important when it comes to the K-Vest data and other data and knowing what that is. And the one thing that I've been telling K-Vest, and not K-Vest, but hit tracks and other people is that if we had the ability to record swings and misses on the hit tracks, I think that would really help coaches as well from a swing miss ratio with some of that stuff. That's the only thing with hit tracks. I mean, it's A+ across the board. I mean, I know everyone, we love it, and it's one of the best tools out there. But when we're training live pitching stuff, machine with off speed, a lot of times we don't get the swing and miss ratios, and we don't get some of that data that we don't that have. So that's one thing that I would really encourage coaches to do, is think about the context of everything.
As hitting coaches, we sometimes, or at least I do, I'm guilty of this, always want to talk about mechanics, but I think first off that you got to be able to believe that you're a good hitter when you're in the box. Like, you have to have confidence. And in my question that I want to throw out to you, because I told a few people that had you coming on, and they wanted me to ask, like, how do you help players with the confidence piece?
That's a great question, man. I would say that in the last 5 years or so, I think I've spent more time on the mental game than I have on anything else. And I think, now being in pro ball, like you could have a lot of times hitters and hitting coaches. We analyze these hitters. Chris Davis of the Orioles. He had his big contract. And he had some years. He's had some rough time. But when you look at his swing, I've broken down his swing a few times. His swing hasn't really changed. His swing's not worse. It's not better. I mean, it's not a swing issue. Okay, and I don't know Chris, so I can't speak to his stuff. But for me, what I've learned with working with a lot of high level players is that sometimes it has nothing to do with swing. It's all mental. It's all confidence. And so I've spent a lot of time over the last few years talking to our hitters about, and I asked them the question, what is the number of offers you would say that you're in a slump and that it would affect your mind? And the answers are all over the place. Like 0 for 4, like 0 for 4. Are you in the clubhouse and like you're pouting and you're angry? Is it 0 for the weekend? Like you're 0 for 12 and that sucks. Like what is your threshold for a slump? Is it 0 for 20? Like when do you start like melting down mentally? And like you get 0 for 4s, you get people who have, and so I just talk a lot about how. You think about Mike Trout, probably the greatest, maybe the greatest hitter of all time at some point, greatest hitter of our generation. He has won MVPs where he's gone 0 for 19 in streaks. He's had years, I've gone through his data. He's had a couple years where he's gone 0 for 19. And he still hit 332 and won the MVP those years. So I try to give perspective to athletes just about, hey, this game is really, really difficult. And you're going to have these times, and some of the best hitters. And so, I think most coaches talk about, hey, the Hall of Fame players, and right now, if you hit 300, that you're going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's going to, if you can frame it around understanding that and understanding that, how difficult it is. And if you focus on just the results of batting average and things like that, there was a year that I was working with Jock Peterson, and the stats were coming out about BABIP and stuff like that. And there was an article that came out, and he was struggling with some stuff, and we were talking. I'm like, that there's a stat right now that shows you are the unluckiest hitter in Major League Baseball right now. You have the highest, you're the most unlucky hitter, barrels to outs, and and I had to talk to him about that because it wears on you. He's hitting the ball really well, but it's not getting the results. So you have to be able to focus on those things. And I think from a confidence standpoint, I talked to a lot of our players a lot about, even at Fresno State, I've told players, hey, we're in the top 15 in the country. Division I softball. There are 1 million girls out here that play softball. Some of you are in the starting lineup at a top 15 team. You are in the top 1% or more of the best hitters in the sport, like in the actual sport of softball. Do you understand that? And do you get that? And I understand that you want to win. I understand you want to get better. I understand you want these results, but I need you to have the perspective that you have worked really hard and you've done the work to become one of the best athletes in this sport. And that is something to celebrate and hold on to from a confidence standpoint too, so that when you're and we talked just a lot about, and Ken Revisa, flushing and finding ways to be able to deal with adversity and to be able to, I think as hitting coaches, we know at the higher levels, you're more of a psychiatrist and a psychologist than you are a swing mechanics coach many times, and just learning how to do that. And, if there's any hitting coaches out there, especially if high school coaches listening, my best advice to you is to have really, really good trusting relationships with your hitters, because the better that relationship is, the more that you can come to them and say, hey, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. And they are going to buy into you. But if you have no relationship with your players and you just come in and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z, the wall's going to go up and like, who are you to tell me what to do and stuff like that. Whereas Patrick, if you're my hitter and I really get to know you, I get to know your life and your family. And like, we actually have a relationship, and I've worked with you and I've served you in ways that trying to help you get better. When you are struggling with something, it could be, and especially like from a mental aspect, I can come to you like, hey man, what's going on? Let's talk about this. And your posture is going to be much more listening. I'm willing to hear what you have to say than if you and I never talked and there's this wall and like, you're over here and I tell you what to do. I'm the coach and you're the player. And that's going to be really difficult. So if you're a high school coach and I would challenge anyone listening to evaluate what is your relationship like with hitters right now, and how much relational trust and equity do you have with them, so that when they're struggling or in a slump, that they're willing to come to you and talk to you about it, and you're able to, and then be able to listen.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice right there. And I love the Jock Peterson, how you mentioned that he was literally the unluckiest hitter in MLB at the time, and he just needed some perspective. And I think that's hard at times for hitters too. So for a hitter, let's say, Jock, he was doing what he was really supposed to do at that time when he was struggling according to maybe his batting average. But for a hitter who's off time, he's too early, he's too late. Are you a fan of, and because I've heard big leaguers talk about this before, of having some guys sacrifice at bats to get them back on track?
Yeah, I mean, I've tweeted about this a few times, but like the only absolute in hitting, like the only thing, there's only one rule, like it has to work. So for me, like when hitters tell me, there are cues that some of us don't like. I'm not a huge fan of get on top of the ball or squish the bug or some of the cues out there. But if a hitter tells me if I do this, or I'm going to try to do this and it works, high five, great job, let's do that. And so I'm always open to creative things. So if a hitter says, you know what, I'm going to go up there and try to do this, or I know a lot of hitters who, hey, I'm going to try to bunt for a hit, or I'm going to I'm trying to try to get on base. I'm going to get on top of the plate. I'm going to wear one, like just to get some momentum going. Dude, I am all for all of those things, for me. Or a lot of times I come up, I have a lot of hitters who say, I'm really struggling with this pitch. I'm going to sit changeup for this whole game, and I'm going to just sit changeup, or I'm going to sit off speed. I'm not going to, I'm going to try to do that. I'm all for trying stuff. I think getting creative with ideas and, like I said, sacrificing at a bat to get on time and different things. To me, again, the only rule is it has to work, and you can try anything you want, and let's talk about it afterwards. Like, hey, did you feel like that helped? No, it didn't. Or yeah, that got me back on, and all right, so I'm all for outside the box thinking when it comes to changing things up.
How do you think we can help hitters make better swing decisions? And I say that, I brought up, how do you help hitters with confidence? I feel you got to have confidence first, and you got to make swing decisions better, good swing decisions next. I think they go in that order. In my own, that's what I believe. Yeah. And then maybe mechanics third. So do you have ways you help your hitters with making better swing decisions?
Yeah, so I would say, especially as the season starts going, like we spend 100% of our time on plate discipline and evaluate. For me, when I got to the University of Missouri, Coach Beezer, a really great offensive mind. His plate discipline knowledge and training it was, incredible. He taught me so much. And for us, with the TrackMan data we had at Missouri and from the past, every week when the leaderboard would go up with all the stats, we had plate discipline scores and for him, he trained it so well. It was incredible. So we would spend in our practices so much time on that. And I stole all of that stuff. It was incredible. So for me, we used Game Sense then, and it was really, really great. How cool is technology nowadays? You got Win Reality, You Hit, slow the game down. Ryan does some great stuff. Game Sense does some really good stuff. So, what I like to do is, for example, like we do a lot of stand-ins in the bullpen. We saw off the handle, and put some concrete in there or some weights in there and make it a weighted bat. And so we have hitters take swings in there. And like the University of Missouri, we had this video room with this huge screen, and we had hitters in the box facing game sense hitters. And so, trying to make it game like, same thing with machines, and trying to practice game like things. And so we would always score it like, hey, you're going to get 10 pitches. How many good decisions did you make? And it could be like, hey, you know what? Today you're going to swing at fastball, you're going to take changeup, or today you're going to swing at this and not swing at this, or you're going to hit it outside. And then you're like, hey, you get 10 pitches at it. All right, you got 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. And we would tell people at the end of practice, hey, Joey was the winner today, got 10 out of 10 plate decisions. So you have to celebrate it. You have to focus on it. And so for me, if you have a hit tracks, for one, that's a great area to start. Like, hey, and from the machine, have the e-hack machine, or if you have a programmable machine that can pitch on the corners and do some different things. We train it every day a lot. We talk about it a lot. We celebrate those who do a good job of it. For me, people ask me all the time, what's your hitting philosophy? And it's do damage and get on base. And at Fresno State this year, we trained it so much. I think we were second in the country in walks. And we had like 3 of our hitters in the top 5 in the country in walks. And we actually had one hitter who, like in 19 at bats, she had 17 walks or something like that. She was in the top 5 in the country. So we trained it so much. And I think that it's if you're not training it, finding ways to train for it. And nowadays there's no excuse, like I said, with all the tools that we have in it. And even if you don't have any tools, I mean, if you have old man BP, you're probably training it already all over the place. But there are so many ways, from stand-ins to the bullpen to technology and video to having practice plans and cages set up where you do or don't swing at pitches. I would say it's one of the most important things we could be training.
Well, and I think what you just brought up too about how just you consciously making it important is maybe the best way to go about it. Like you talked about celebrating, making good swing decisions and talking about it all the time and having different drills and stuff, just making a big emphasis on it. I think may be the best way to go about it. That was good stuff. One last thing I wanted to kind of bring up and talk to you about, because I've seen one of the reasons I like following you online is, it's not, you don't just do mechanics or even just swing decisions. It's a lot of different stuff. And I've seen some of your content lately with like Coffee with Coach Lyle and how you've talked about amateur baseball. How can we make amateur baseball better?
Man, that's a great question. And something that's been on my heart for many, many years.
Yeah.
I in 2009 and 10, I coached at a high school that was really low income high school in a low income community, and we did some really, really cool free camp stuff in the community. And I look back to those times, and there was some really, really, I'm really glad that I did that. And for me, the problem that we have with amateur baseball and sports in general is like the cost is out of control. And I totally get, like, and I understand, like, parents who want to spend money on gear and lessons development. I'm all for that. I think that's great. And do those things, like, and get on the best travel team and have 4 uniforms and travel across the country. Have fun with that. And I will never bag on that. I think the problem that we have is, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. My dad was a refinery worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And if in the landscape of baseball now, there's no chance I would have been able to play on any of these teams. I would have played on the Little League team, the rec team. I never really had good gear. And so I just think that you are missing out on just a huge, huge amount of kids who could learn to really love this game because they don't have the opportunities to do that. And I know MLB does a good job with RBI stuff. And I just think there needs to be more and more people advocating for how do we give opportunities to kids who don't have the opportunity to have gloves and get on the travel teams. And, if I was a travel ball coach and running travel ball organization right now, I would try to find ways to fundraise to have 1 or 2 players in your team that are scholarship players, or try to find ways to do that, to be out in the community, helping, like I said, doing a free camp and just having and having kids out there, because it is just so difficult. The entry point, my kids play Little League, and my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, my 8-year-old son, it's $200 a kid. It's $400 just for them to play. And it's just rec ball. And that's still expensive, relative. And I think when we were kids, I played Little League. I think I asked my mom, like, what do you guys pay? I was like, maybe $50, and you got everything you needed, like pants, socks, jersey, hat. You got it all for that price. And so, to me, it's just, I think everybody from the top to the bottom needs to continue to find ways to create opportunities for those who are not as fortunate as everyone else to be able to do that. And I think that's the best way to help youth baseball to grow. And I know that Andrew McCutcheon does a really good job of speaking on it. I know there's some other guys, and as much as people can shine a light on that and try to find ways. I think it's a challenge, but I think it's something we've got to try to figure out how to give the kids opportunities that wouldn't get it.
That was great. Great way of great advice that you just gave about having a scholarship, right? If you run a travel organization, like even just one or two kids, like that's one or two kids who now get an opportunity that never would have gotten the chance, and who knows what that could lead to.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, my last year coaching, coached travel ball team back in 2006 or something like that, and none of the coaches made a single dime. And we would just, that back in those days, I don't remember anybody making any money coaching travel ball, but we had 3 or 4 guys who, like, in the cost of paying for umpires. I mean, it probably cost us, we traveled a little bit, cost $500 a kid, just in the sense of buying balls, and we traveled to a couple different spots, but the kids who they couldn't pay a dime. It was zero chance they were going to pay. And so we had a barbecue dinner fundraiser, and we did a car wash, and our kids knew, like the kids who could afford it, they knew that like that money was going to go to help pay for those 2 or 3 guys. And, and what's funny is, I mean, parents talked about it in the background, like, why did I pay the $500 and these guys didn't? I don't, but the kids themselves, they never, they're, at least to my experience, they never complained about having some of these players, and especially the ones who are good. They never complained about, I had to pay my travel ball fees and they didn't. And I know that I still have relationships with those guys 15 years later. And I know, how appreciative they were that they got to be on that travel ball team. They could have done that. So I don't think it's difficult to ask a lot of travel ball organizations to try to figure out, hey, how can we subsidize to get some players that couldn't afford it, and find some ways to do that.
Man, that's good stuff, man. I know there's going to be some travel ball organizations who are going to listen to this, and hopefully that sparks some ideas for them. And like you said, I know there's some really good people out there who do run them and do try to do well, and hopefully that, by you giving that advice that can help. I mean, I'm starting to think of things just for myself that after you said that. So that's really good stuff, man. And you're doing a really good job of promoting the game the right way, and developing players and putting out good content, like I said, not just on mechanics or drills, but of amateur baseball, like how to talk to coaches and parents, advice for parents. And it's just, it's just good stuff, man. And if anyone can follow you, or is there one particular place? I know you have like over 1 million followers, but is there one place you focus more of your time on a social media platform?
Not really. I mean, for me, my thing is at Coach Lyle on all platforms. But I think I used to spend a lot of time on Twitter. Twitter, as you know, is a dumpster fire is probably the best way to ever explain Twitter in general. So I haven't spent a lot of time there. I have a little bit more lately, but honestly, I spend a lot of time on Instagram now, and I've tried to build that up a little. That's one area that I have struggled to build. That's where all the cool kids hang out, I guess. And so I've tried to build that up a little bit. But for me, I do the best I can to try to engage with people. But Twitter's probably the easiest to engage with people and try to do that. But I try to spend my time as much as I can on all the platforms and trying to answer people and as much as I can.
Awesome. Matt, appreciate you coming on today, man. It's good stuff. Had a lot of fun and enjoyed it.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate it. And to everybody already knows this, but you do an incredible job too, and helping grow the game. I've seen you kind of grow the last couple of years on social media, and you're doing a really, really good job. So I appreciate you having me on, and keep crushing it, man.
Appreciate it, man.